Welcome in here, guys. It is Kurt Magoosh and Slaughterhouse Sports, and I know that I haven't, I know I've been out a couple of days, but we're going to get some, decent recruiting news tonight out on the channel. We're also going to review a couple of SEC teams. We're going to review a couple of SEC teams, in our recruiting rankings, and we're going to get to all of that. And we're going to look at a couple of classes for 2023. We've been, hammering out here 2023 and been trying to keep up with this fiscal year of recruiting and everything associated with that in the 2023 season. Alrighty, guys, so let's talk about kind of the bombshell story that went down last week. It was Nick Saban out at an Alabama fundraiser. He was talking about the Texas A&M Aggies and Jimbo Fisher. He said that Texas A&M has paid for all of their football players, and he even made a reference to Hunter going to Jackson State in Mississippi. Off of that Barstool Deion Sanders-like package, okay? So let's just talk about what Nick Saban said about Jimbo Fisher, and then we're going to break all of this down, and I'm going to tell you my opinions on all of the transactions of words that have been said by Jimbo and by Coach Nick Saban. So there's a lot of coaches in college football and in college sports. They do not like the transfer portal. They do not like the ability of guys to just flat out have boosters paying for athletes. They look at it as a game that they want these kids to be mentored by them. They believe that there's a time and place for when they will be professionals in the NFL, and they like amateur athletics because they want players to, again, go to school, be regular students, but also be great talents, and they're very young. And the way that college football has been for a long time is that you haven't been able to pay players, okay, for play. Now these college athletes have made a lot of money for the school with their play, especially the great college football programs. And there have been a couple of players that have blazed the trail, like Johnny Manziel, maybe Adrian Peterson. There's been Leonard Fournette at LSU. There have been players that have sold jerseys in large quantities, all right? So you look at it's $1 billion business, okay? And Texas A&M has all this oil money, and they've basically gone out there, and they're a little bit desperate with Jimbo Fisher. They've never been able to win the SEC West. They beat Alabama this past year. I know that they beat them with Sumlin, but Jimbo Fisher's never really been close to competing with Alabama, in the state for a chance at an SEC West championship. I mean, maybe the closest chance was with Kellen Mond when I believe that they beat North Carolina in a New Year's Six Bowl, which was very impressive. They went like 11-2 a year ago. That was their best season. But we look at Texas A&M, and they're not at the level of Alabama football. They're just not. So this year they go out and recruit, and they get Walter Nolan. They get Gabriel Downey from Fort Lauderdale, who's a 5-star defensive end. They end up getting this guy Anthony Lucas from Scottsdale, who's an edge rusher. They get a 4/5-star guy from Philly that is also a tremendous rusher. They get a good quarterback, a guy who they're very high on, who was a top 5 quarterback recruit in this class. You end up getting Evan Stewart, who is one of the fastest wide receivers in the class. But the defensive line is outrageously talented for Texas A&M, as we've highlighted on this show. And I think that Walter Nolan's going to be the number 1 pick in probably the 2025 draft or the 26 draft, the 25 draft, because he is that talented. So, Texas A&M what they've been able to do on the recruiting trail has been unprecedented. They're the number one recruiting class, but they're not just the number one recruiting class. They have the highest ranking they have the highest class ranking ever. So Nick Saban is clearly intimidated by this tactic. He's clearly worried about his standing in the SEC, and he's worried about beating Texas A&M because he's worried that this defensive line and Walter Nolan is going to be too much of a presence for Nick Saban in Alabama to beat. All right. You look at Texas A&M's recruiting, and it is off the charts. It is incredible. So Nick Saban is intimidated. He's worried because there's never been a threat quite like A&M's recruiting class. You know, Marshall Malkow and all these guys that are kind of paying for these players. Okay. And Texas A&M with NIL, they're paying a boatload of money for these guys. I'm pretty sure of it. I mean, it's been reported at numerous sites. I mean, maybe these guys are all coming off of their own merit for free from Philadelphia and Scottsdale. All right, A&M has very good facilities. It's been a good program in the last 10 years, but it doesn't have the history of Alabama football. It doesn't have the success. It doesn't have the success of like a Florida State. Doesn't have the success of a University of Miami or a Nebraska or a powerhouse in the 80s or 90s. And lately it's been good. You had Manziel, but other than that, it's kind of been like a little bit 8-4-ish, you know, going back to the Kellen Mond years. You had the Sumlin tenure not turn out so well. All right, so Jimbo's been fine at Texas A&M, but he's never really been elite at Texas A&M. They've been good. They've been solid. So, you know, Georgia has more fertile. I mean, A&M isn't a fertile recruiting ground, but Georgia's had the history. So, but put it this way, with the way that they're recruiting, to Nick Saban, they're making maybe a mockery of the recruiting. So, you know, I look at Saban, and he's very worried about his place. He's very worried about his dominance in the SEC. He wants to put out a warning shot right now to kind of keep A&M under the microscope, kind of a little bit like Ole Miss and the Kim Dichis and Laquan Treadwell out there. So this is a thing that's kind of been going around college football is people don't like the way that Texas A&M is using this system. They're intimidated by the way that they're using the system. All right. Now, how do I feel about Texas A&M and what they're doing? Jimbo Fisher coming out there and kind of lambasting Nick Saban. I think it would have been healthier if he didn't do that at all and just took the high road because they are doing it the right way. I give A&M a lot of credit for spending this money to be good. I like teams that care. I like teams that spend money on these guys. It's great news for the players that they're getting paid. I mean, it is tough. There's some drawback here with NIL. Like, it is tough to see guys that are sometimes at a program for 2 or 3 years and, you know, they're stars at that program and then they decide to leave just to maybe chase money or something, or you want to, I guess with parity, you know, it could be tough at a school like Pittsburgh that might win 7 or 8 games and has Keaton Slovis there, that their receiver Jordan Addison is going out to USC. So the transfer portal, that might be even more of an interesting discussion than guys out of high school deciding where they want to play college football. But the point is, A&M, just because they have a great defensive line, like, are they going to win a championship in the next 3 years? It is possible, but Alabama could still recruit exceptional players. And it is going to be probably 1 year of dominance for Texas A&M. Maybe Nick Saban's worried and paranoid about Texas A&M carrying the decade. I want to see A&M win one title first with this class because you still have to have good offense to win, and I'm worried about their quarterback position. So it's an interesting time. I mean, just because you have the best recruits, like there's a chance, in all likelihood, because you have that defensive line, you are going to be very good and have a lot of options. But are you going to be elite and just roll over the sport and completely dominate it? It's almost a little bit like Golden State, where even though they have Durant, Steph, and Clay, and they were very, very good, they weren't like a complete total dynasty that shut down the league. I mean, they had a couple of great seasons, but I mean, this NIL thing is going to continue to twist and turn quickly. And I would say that NIL has been a change. The paying of these players has been a big change. It isn't just your local dealership that's giving a guy $20,000. These guys are making millions of dollars. It's been a big deal. It has altered the sport quickly. It's a change that has been a massive change, and it's been very quick. So it's uncomfortable to shift gears so quickly. And you're seeing a lot of coaches in basketball and football. You're seeing a lot of coaches bow out and retire because they're just not used to having to forwardly commit to having these discussions about payment, because they enjoy just being able to kind of coach kids. Like, I guess that's what high school coaches would like rather than professionals. You know, you're coaching kids. It's not salaries. Because a booster's paying a kid a ton of money, you now have to play. You don't have a choice in terms of your depth chart. Because a guy's making so much money, you're not going to sit him on the bench, or else the booster will be pissed and will get you fired. Okay. There hasn't been conversations in the past about how we're going to allocate these resources, how much are we going to pay this kid to come to our campus at all levels. It hasn't, listen, a school like Villanova basketball, it hasn't happened, all right, at a school like Creighton. Basketball in the Big East, that these conversations didn't take place as much in the past. We can say that, all right? So there's good and bad with the NIL. I think it's mostly good. It's great for these kids. It's great for their families. It's great that they make money, that they learn how to live with money, handle money, and they deserve it because their talents are exceptionary talents, and they are the 1% of talent in the world for the sports of football and basketball and some baseball, and then there's some female athletes as well that are exceptionally talented at what they do. All right, so here's the thing that I'm going to talk about, though, let's talk about the negative aspects of paying. The tough part is, you recruit a kid, you have all the right intentions, but then he just goes somewhere because it's more money. Now, it challenges you because you really got to build up your relationship, which is fine. I don't like other coaches kind of poaching players or them leaving the school, but in fairness, the player still has the power to decide to go to your school and stay at your school. And if you get guys to the league, they're still going to be fine going to your school, playing at your school, all right? And they're still going to realize that they're going to get paid in the league. And if they're all chasing the money, and their family wants all money, it's their prerogative, and you could probably find people that will take less money to play for you because they love being around you. It is tough and tough to swallow for fans. Yeah, I'm going to say it because, nobody feels sorry for the fans. They're all going to feel sorry for the players. But let's talk about it from a fan's perspective. It is a difficult predicament for these fans that when you have a guy that's a homegrown talent and then you see that 21-year-old player go to a university that pays him more, it is tough. You don't want to lash out at the young man. He's making his own decision for him and his family. But it is disappointing or depressing to see guys transfer. You want continuity. I think that continuity can be good for a fan base. I think that recognition, when you recognize a player and you could kind of see that player grow from a freshman to an upperclassman to a junior and senior, that's what's part of what makes college football so special, is that bond, college sports, that bond with that player as they grow up in this important period of time in their lives, 18 to 22 years old. But again, I'm sure Pittsburgh can find a way to give Addison some money. And then if Addison loved Pittsburgh, loved the chance to play with Keaton Slovis, you know that the offensive coordinator there, Mark Whipple, left. So there were factors in him deciding to go to USC, probably outside of money. And then if he gets paid that much money, playing with Lincoln Riley, you have a great chance to make it to the NFL. And then for Pittsburgh, it's up to you as a coach. not only to make Addison's experience fantastic, but also to recruit depth. And with the transfer portal now, the University of Pittsburgh, it rewards schools that care about football, that pay money for football. All right, so you're seeing now Nebraska and Tennessee in these programs that, Nebraska, their recruiting is not as great now because it's tough to find great talent from the state of Nebraska. And then in the 90s, they were the only game on television. So it was a little bit of a monopoly with Nebraska football and Tom Osborne. But now that Nebraska, again, the Big Red Inn, their fan base, now that they care so much about the game of football, they can raise great money. So they can get guys in the transfer portal from smaller schools, from JUCOs. They can pay out. They can get guys that are 20 years old that are going to be really successful. And they have a lot of financial backing because the teams care. So it's rewarding really good fan bases. It's going to reward fan bases like Arkansas, like Texas Tech. A&M's a very good fan base. So it rewards special fan bases. Tennessee's a fanatical fan base that's going to raise a lot of money. University of Texas, is a pretty good fan base. So it's going to get the intrigue back in the sports. These guys are getting paid. It is an adjustment period for people. Some change is really, to certain people, change is difficult. And I don't think universally that people should just say, just evolve with the times, get with the times, and just take change, and all change is good change, and all of it is going to be positive. I mean, there's been some rule changes that have completely been awful for sports, and that people should never, and people should have strong opinions against it. Like, for me, the 17-game NFL season is still something that really bothers me, or the fact that you can have a 13-3 NFL team that loses one game to a 14-2 team in the regular season, and they have to play in the first round of the NFL playoffs and don't get a bye. That is frustrating too. The pass interference review was a terrible rule. The targeting rule is a stupid rule, especially for a senior playing his last game against his biggest rival. There's a smaller receiver, ducks his head. It ends up looking like a spear, even though the intent was not at all to do it. And now he's ejected and cannot play his dream, his final game, even though this particular player might not even be playing NFL football. This is his last go around. So you even saw that with Jamison Williams not even able to play in the Auburn game because of targeting. So there's some rules, there's some changes that are really frustrating, but there's some that people adapt to and that are pretty good rules. The college football playoff at 4 teams rather than 2, rather than the BCS, was a really interesting change that I think made college football more compelling, and was a great change. It wasn't that the old system was terrible, but has just made it even better. So NIL right now is fascinating. I like the idea of recruiting and paying these guys out. Does Saban have a point in this? I think that Saban is really worried about Jimbo. Jimbo is living rent-free in Nick Saban's head. That is what is going on with Alabama. That is what is going on. Alabama is paranoid of Texas A&M. A&M is striking a nerve with Nick Saban, okay? Nick Saban is clearly worried because Nick Saban has had the power of the players, and now A&M has all of the talent. And listen, you can have okay coaching, but if your talent is tremendous, you're going to have a chance. All right, so sometimes you need that unbelievable talent, and this class that A&M has brought in has just added to the ability of talent. And now with NIL, with USC and Oregon, I mean, Alabama's guys are going to get poached because of money, and it is intimidating to Nick Saban. When these guys were all not making any money, it would all be, where can I get to the National Football League? But now you're seeing a lot of schools be able to compete with Alabama because A&M has oil money, has even more money than Alabama. USC has a lot of money in L.A. Ohio State's going to have a lot of money, so it's an arms race, and Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney are not at the top, and these are guys that have been at the top of their industry for a really, really long time, and they're getting intimidated because other guys are now on the block and there's new incoming threats. All right, so you feel for them in this case. You understand why, when you're accustomed to doing something in your life and that thing that you love doing, which is winning championships and recruiting a certain way, is uphalted in one summer and you don't have time to really adapt, and it's a whirlwind of new adjustments, it is going to cause angst. It's going to cause anxieties. Players making money off of their own name, maybe there's a way that, hey, you can go on a radio show, you could sell your own jersey, car dealerships. I mean, capping a certain amount of numbers, that is not, that's tough, because it's also not making the most of your ability. And there are examples of guys. Matt Barkley ends up hurting his shoulder senior year, never really has the NFL career he could have had. Bo Jackson, if he played back in college, he could have earned a lot more money back in NIL days as a Heisman Trophy candidate, and he could have had more generational wealth based on the talents that he possessed. Marshawn Lattimore, or Marcus Lattimore from Burns High School, who played at South Carolina, played with Chase Dodd. He was one of the great running backs in college football and suffered a knee injury that impeded his ability to be a first-round pick. Maurice Clarett might have had an even better future for himself if he earned the amount of money that he could have made in college. Braxton Miller, Brady Quinn, a lot of guys, J.T. Barrett, Cardell Jones. There's so many guys, Johnny Football. There's so many guys that are great in college. That can, because the NFL and the pros, you never know how it's going to be with injuries, coaching, systems, all of that. And when you play a sport, especially like football and somewhat basketball, any sport you risk. And with football, you're risking injury. You're putting your body on the line. So to be able to be a college football star and be able to maximize your talent and your ability and everything you worked for in your life and be able to make money is kind of what we want society to be like. We want people that have talent to get rewarded, all right? I think that that's all a positive thing. And a lot of times these players have a lot of adversities that they deal with. And sometimes they come from, backgrounds where they can use the financial assistance. So sometimes football is a pathway to gaining money, whether it's in the professional ranks, but now for the college ranks, it will help families. The transfer portal is tough. You feel for a school like Pittsburgh. You feel for coaching staffs that recruit well but cannot keep up with the amount of money that these players are making. There will be players that take the money and are maybe, should we say, maybe too flashy about the money and creates problems in the locker room, but that's just going to prepare you for the professionals. These coaches, the fat players, 18-year-olds can be tough to coach. 19-year-olds, they can be tougher to coach than maybe 30-year-olds. That's just life experience. And when you're younger, when you're 18, 19 years old, you're most of the time you're maybe different than when you're a 32-year-old person. That's just different. So the fact that these 18-year-olds are making lots of money, it will cause some distraction. And it will cause a challenge. Not in every case. Some kids might. Every kid is different. But in some cases, it will cause challenges to coaching. So the sport is different. The recruiting process will be different. As a fan of the sport of college football and college basketball, I like a lot of parts of it. I like Nebraska. I like Creighton basketball. The schools that really care about sports, that put a lot of money into it, are really being rewarded for caring with the ability to get a NIL. It forces coaches to have outstanding relationships with players, so you build up that loyalty. So when it gets down to junior year and a school might be offering them a little bit more money, or maybe even a significant amount more, sometimes the player will be making sacrifices because of the relationships that they have. And it also is providing insurance for guys and might give them incentives to play in the bowl games. All right. So there are a lot of positives that come with it. A&M has an unbelievable class. I don't really know if I want to see this system fixed. I mean, I don't really see a lot wrong with what is going on right now in college sports. And eventually, I've heard this too, that right now it's the trendy thing is to pay lots of money, but some of these guys that are getting paid these $7 million, they're not going to be that successful. And not every 5-star hits. It is about development. It is about coaching. So you're really going to see coaching matter. And then for some of these boosters, they'll pay money for a guy that ends up not being very good. Or they'll fire a coach that doesn't play their guy that is a great coach. So, I mean, and in the past, like, there are stories of under the cover, payments that have been going on for a while, but the point is that I hear that the market in the next couple of years, right now the market's really high for these NIL guys, but you're going to see some massive busts, and some universities are going to be more hesitant because they're not going to win the national championship. There's only going to be a couple of schools that vie for that championship, and right now there's a lot of schools that are paying as if they're going to anticipate winning a national championship, so the market will regulate over time. I don't believe that we need to start capping things, limiting the amount of money that people make, all right? So, yeah, it's an interesting conversation with college sports and these players. It could get heated. It could get nasty. Some guys want, the players they consider like 18, 19-year-olds. They go to a game, and if they're not getting paid, they're more, they're college kids. It's tougher to insult somebody that, isn't making the money, and that maybe they'll listen to authority or listen to older people more. And they're worried about the ego of paying people millions of dollars, especially young people. It can be intimidating to older people. There's some things that bother me, and that just doesn't bother me as much because, you look at the NBA or you look at golf or soccer or all these other sports, and these guys are getting paid at 19 years old. And then I just reference the stories of that football isn't for long, and you want these talented individuals to have a chance to monetize their abilities and make money and learn how to handle money and learn how to live responsibly with the gifts that they have and the financial compensation that comes with it. It can be frustrating. A&M has certainly gone above and beyond to get this recruiting class and has spent money and resources into it. I think Saban was accurate on that. He just singled out A&M. So the fact that he singled them out, it's unprecedented for another coach to be talking business about another school. Saban started all of this. Jimbo defended his players. Jimbo defended it, and they've done it the right way. Now, is Jimbo Fisher rude to Nick Saban a little bit? Yeah, he was heated. He was emotional. I'm sure that there are a couple of things that Jimbo Fisher would want to say back, or that I would not say about another individual, like about someone's upbringing and things. Like, that's what made it epic. It was like a wrestling bout. I'm sure Nick Saban could be mature enough to understand that Jimbo Fisher is a hot-headed individual. Sometimes his energy runs hot. And Nick Saban also poked it. He started it. So you could complain this behind closed doors, but this is very telling for Texas A&M. This is great news if you're an A&M fan, because your school is headed on the way, Nick Saban believes, to win a national championship. Your team is supposed to be unfairly good on the field. You have the czar of college football saying that this class has been bought, that it's unfair, that has to be great news for A&M and Jimbo Fisher and this class. If A&M wins 3 straight championships and they win going away, then I bet we're going to have different conversations. If A&M goes and they lose to Alabama still in the coming years, we're going to see the same sort of thing happen. I believe that it could be that things will be adapted slowly over time. I'm for that. I don't want the government, or I don't want the NCAA really interfering with NIL that much. I think that'll make matters a lot worse. I think that right now the system that we have isn't awful. The transfer portal stuff, maybe, I mean, it is frustrating to see a player that you love and then they go in conference to the other rival. Now, the player will take some hostility from fans. It should never be death threats. It should never be threats of physical violence. You don't want to see fans curse at another player. But if they're like, damn, that kid's disloyal, he's not going to be a Red Raider for life or whatever, or he's not going to be a player that we support for life, that there's nothing wrong with it if they spurn you to go to another school when they're 22 years old. So a fan base has a reason to be upset or disappointed when their star leaves to go to the rival school. That's a normal emotion of a fan. Again, I'm not saying to be incredibly hostile, but you're allowed to be disappointed as a fan. That's what fans do. We expect fans to be robotic sometimes in this ordeal, in this world. So there's so much to unpack. My thoughts are in this. This was kind of just a rambling session. I think Jimbo Fisher's got the upper hand in this bout, in this battle. I look at Alabama, and Nick Saban is clearly worried about Jimbo Fisher and this whole NIL going on. It's an interesting time in college sports and college athletics. There's going to be a lot more that is going to come from it, but it's an exciting time. Again, I don't think there should be wholesale changes. I think we're going to see a lot of competition. Alabama could still hit the transfer portal. Alabama's still going to have options, still going to be really good, still going to be one of the top teams in the country. Alrighty, guys, it was fun. Thank you guys for listening to the show, watching the show on Jimbo, on Nick Saban, on NIL. It is something to monitor as we go forward. Alrighty, guys, take care.